Heart Change You Live. I'm Ashley, and with me today are Heather and David, and we are here to help equip you to change lives. So today we are talking about the dating game. That's the title today.
That is the title.
And
Are you into that right now?
dating?
I've just given it a hard time.
Oh, I was like, I should hope not. I'm married to your son.
Yes.
If you have anything to add, any comments, questions, please get into the comments in your feed and let us know what you're thinking or what your question is about. We'd love to answer your questions. We have Matthew in the control room. He'll let us know, and hopefully, let's have fun today. I'm excited. So, okay, the dating game. Where did this come from, or?
Well, it's been a theme that's been happening in our classes around the program actually lately. I've been thinking a lot about how culture shapes our practices of dating and what we look for, and so we were actually doing a class in our women's group for the last, couple of months, looking at where did we get these ideas about what we're looking for, Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about when I was a kid and what the prevailing message was,
man.
right?
Oh, man.
So
That's a button for me.
Disney princesses, that's
Snow White met her husband in a forest while talking to animals, and I'm like, if my daughter did that, I'd be like,
don't talk to strangers in a forest.
don't talk to strangers. Yeah. I'm like, and all of a sudden he's the one.
Right.
I'm like, you danced with him and you didn't even know his name.
And this is
Come
what,
on, honey.
Right. This is what we're showing little kids. What's her Sleeping Beauty? He kisses her while she's passed out from being poisoned. For me, my favorite one was, like roofies. Anybody? For me, my favorite one was The Little Mermaid. And what a crazy, when I can look at it now through new eyes and I see actually kind of how prophetic it was in my life, that this girl who is quite rebellious, quite fancy-free and free-spirited and doing her own thing, comes across this man in distress washed up on a shore that she can fix, by the way, and in her mind constructs this fantasy that he's the one. And so she leaves everything that's good in her life, her family, her friends, her sisters, everything that she likes, goes to a witch and has a spell cast over her in exchange for giving up the gift that God gave her of her voice so that she can transform herself into something totally different for a guy she doesn't even know.
Yeah, like she
and a
doesn't
life
even
she doesn't
know.
even know about.
Yeah.
It's just why do we think this is a good thing for little girls to be emulating? But I sang every song.
Yeah, like my daughter even was like, Mom, I wish you were a queen so I could be a princess. And I was like, oh, honey, I would not wish that on you.
Right.
And we had to talk about if this truly happened, here's what your life would look like and how awful that would be. And she was like, oh, yeah, but I still want to be a princess.
Right.
I mean, she's 7, so I'll give
that's
her
better
that.
than, me. My role models growing up, because I'm a child of the late 70s, early 80s, it was Madonna that was the girl that everybody wanted to be. And when I look at that now and I think, I didn't have a snowball's chance. That's just really the truth. And when I look at the messaging today, it's even more out there, backward, upside down, crazy, because we have these apps where you just see a picture of somebody and say, yep, want that one? Nope, don't want that one. Yep, want that one. And then it's hey, wanna hook up? What is that?
That would make me want to slap somebody.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. That would just be like, no, go away.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, and two, I think there's also this idea that male-female relationships exist solely to give pleasure and enjoyment, to some degree companionship, but that's not even really the focus. You know, it's mainly pleasure. And as soon as that relationship stops giving you value and pleasure, then move on. Like, that's the idea. And that's like, this is all so far away from what God wants or intends. It's ridiculous.
Yes, that's exactly why I thought we really needed to talk about this, because we have all these models of what not to do. And when we got to the end of actually the paper that you wrote about this, one of the questions was like, what's your vision now for the future? And I'm like, well, obviously everything I've been taught and been doing is wrong. And so I need to ask a lot more questions. And I'm so blessed. I thought about how blessed I was, because when I got here to the program, I didn't have anyone I could ask those questions to, honestly. And I didn't have a team. I didn't have anybody in my life. And I know that there are people who are watching this that feel the same way. So, you know, we've got lots of worldly things, but, you know, if I'm really trying to live as a Christian, if I'm trying to live my life differently, if I'm trying to live my life in a healthy way, I need models for that. And there is no model for dating in the Bible. You know, that was a different culture. What we do now is very different than the biblical model.
Yeah, we don't send our employee to go find our wife.
Right.
Or our son's wife. You know, that just doesn't happen now.
Right.
You know?
Right. If she offers to feed your flock, then you know that she's
the one. She's the winner.
She's the one God's chosen for you.
There is some wisdom in that, because if she's going to do that, that takes a lot of work. She's going to be a hard worker. And, you know, I mean, there's a tiny bit of wisdom there.
Yes.
I feel like, I mean, I hope I'm not offending the Bible somehow. But.
No, I totally think that there are things we can learn about that. Like looking at the story of Ruth and Boaz, for example, it kind of looks like, at first glance to me, I was like, she's just looking for a dude to take care of her. That's really how I looked at it. There's nothing noble about that. But when you look back at what Boaz was seeing in her, he said, word of you already came to me. And I know that you know, were loyal to your mother-in-law, that you left your people and chose not to go back in order to come and worship our God. I know that I saw you working in the field. I saw you gleaning. I saw you willing to take it back to your mother-in-law to work hard. You know, like, he saw her character before he said, yeah, I'll go to bat for you, you know?
And the thing I like about that story, and it's not, I don't think so obvious, but coming from a farming background, is there's time that occurs between the different events in that story.
Yes.
Like, this isn't like he sees her and then he's like, hey, baby.
Thank you.
You know, come on, come over to my house. That doesn't happen. Like, there's time and there's space. And it happens a lot slower than maybe what you read or may think on the surface.
That's a really good point. And thank you for bringing that up, because for me, that's about the best I've been able to come up with, is take it slow. Take it really slow. Actually get to know someone. There's a joke in recovery circles. How do you know when an addict's on their second date? There's a U-Haul in the driveway. Like, that's just that's the way that it works. So, but that is the world we live in. You know, also when we were growing up, it was modeled that people would go on a date still. You know, and if there were people having sex outside of marriage on a TV show or a movie, it was generally they were having an affair. That's almost always. And you knew that was wrong. There was a feeling that's betrayal. That's bad. But now you cannot watch a TV show without people hooking up in the elevator on the way to their office. You know, I mean, it's wild. So the time has gotten much shorter too. So following some guidelines of actually getting to know someone and witnessing their character, and also having someone else who can vouch for them, like Ruth did. He's one of our kinsman redeemers. You know, having a mentor that's a godly person outside. So anyway, that's the reason why I chose this topic. As you can see, I have many questions and not a whole lot of answers. But you guys are all Christians who are married. And I'm excited about that.
This has been intriguing
including
to
Matthew.
me. Like, this has been fun, But I'm just interested over here because David's just smiling and nodding. Like, he doesn't have a whole lot to add to the Disney princess conversation.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too. There's not really much to add to that one.
Uh-huh. So, okay. So we've kind of talked about how, like, what not to do and what the world thinks. Let's shift into, like, what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
So, because you have down here, where can we find godly influences in this area? You know, and that's a hard question, I think.
Yeah.
Married people that are happily married.
Yes.
Happily Christian married people, I would add.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, okay, I'll go off on a little tangent. One of my pet peeves is like people thinking that like marriage is the answer. Like all you have to do is date someone and get married. You know what? Marriage is hard.
Yes.
It's not all rainbows and sunshine. You legitimately want to hurt the other person at some moments. You know? Like you shouldn't.
Are you speaking from experience?
Yes,
here?
I am. You shouldn't. I am not condoning violence or purposeful hurting of other people. But I'm just saying, like, living with another broken person is hard, even when you do love them with all your might. Yeah. Just saying. So, like, this is like getting this right, choosing the right person is very important. That's really the point. It's very important.
I think you just made your first fallacy.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was just about to jump in too.
I can
Good
see
catch.
Matthew
Come on, guys.
twitching over there.
We'll go. What were you going to say?
Well, I just think that when you say choose the right person is the first part, was the first, we'll say misstep. 'Cause,
Okay.
I mean, I
Be
agree. You want to
wise in
choose the
your
right
choice.
person, but I don't believe there's one right person, but also marriage can be easy if you don't have a selfish attitude and you're willing to sacrifice what you want to build up the other person. That can make it easy, but it's a death to self thing. But we'll let Pastor jump in.
Hey, I get to talk.
Woo!
We'll let you now.
It was kind of funny. I was just like, whoa, normally I'm the one that goes on the rants, and I haven't even said a word yet. So it was kind of interesting. But I picked up on the same thing that he said about choosing the right person. Immediately, you're playing back into the romantic love picture that there is a right person, and if I choose that right person, then everything's just going to work and everything's going to be fine. And so that's just flaw number one. Now, do I believe, I'll argue a little bit with what Matthew was saying, do I believe God leads and he guides? And so in that sense, if you're following the will of God, there is a right person. I would agree with that. I would agree that God leads in that process. And so if I'm obeying him, if I'm responding to him, the process gets much more reliable. You know, it's a good thing. And
I think
there may not be a right person, but there are definitely wrong people.
Absolutely. And I kind of lean towards the right person mentality because, you know, God has a plan for people's life, for those who love him and are called according to his purposes. For certain people, there are a plan, you know, and I'm a planner, so I know what's involved in plans. And that's like people, places, like if you're going on a vacation, you know where you're going, who you're going with, and what you need to bring. You know, like plan isn't just like this fluffy thing. Like there's like actual details when it comes to planning. And I think your lifelong spouse is a big detail.
So that would require you to be able to follow that plan perfectly, which would then put the onus on you having to pick the right person.
Submit.
But that's why I said I don't disagree that there's a right person, or maybe a better way would be a godly person.
A godly choice.
But I know I probably messed up my first 300 plans because I was such an idiot when I was younger, right? But the Lord still used it and still allowed me to be blessed with a wonderful wife like Erin. So, you know, how am I to say that I was on his original plan, or was that his original plan? You know what I mean? That's why I say there's a godly choice, but I don't think there's a single right choice, because then it puts too much weight on the one decision you make rather than just trusting the Lord.
But that's assuming you're making it by yourself, though. Like what I'm talking about is partnering with God and allowing God to speak into who am I supposed to marry. Like finding the right one is not like okay, I'm going to make my choice on what the right one is. I'm talking about partnering with God to say, okay, God, who is the person you want me to marry?
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
The other thing I heard you say when you first brought up the one, which is even more important to me, is that this one, it's the Jerry Maguire this one completes me and everything's good now. That is the fairy tale happily ever after, right off into the sunset. I'm going to call it a lie from hell, honestly. It is, you know, I was listening to a pastor, I appreciate what you were saying, who was saying, you know, we've taken this pagan idea of Cupid and we've secularized it into the one, and we've even Christianized it into God has one for me, you know, my Boaz, but we don't hear the rest of the story. You know, we don't see that it's really a process of what God wants, which is to make us into his image. And that is hard. That is death to self. That is, so this person will not necessarily be the person who completes you. It's going to be the person maybe who challenges, not in a way that's abusive. Let me be clear, you know, that we don't want that, but it's going to bring up, I think. Do you guys agree it's going to bring up those things to turn over to God?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be abusive to drive you nuts.
Yeah.
You know?
We just got a really good comment from a Facebook follower, Sasha. She said, I like how the title is dating, and yet we are spending a great deal of time discussing marriage.
Wow.
Is that part of the point?
Let's talk
and
about
I say,
that.
oh, that's the entire point.
Yes.
But that would be me. So
No. I think that's amazing, because I did get to a place a few years ago where I'll never forget. I was sworn off. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's broken my heart too many times. I'm just tired. I'm tired of the game. And so I just started asking myself, why do we date? Why do I date? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep putting myself out there, as they like to, all these kind of words that we say, you know? And my girlfriends were like, you should get on these dating apps and you should do this. And I really had to ask myself, like, for what? What do I want? And even then, this is before I was a Christian. Even then, this is 10 years ago, a husband. That's the point of dating. It's to find a husband. So even then, I knew that. And I'm very thankful for that. There was something in my heart that just knew that casual dating, all that kind of nonsense, was not for me. I even heard a pastor recently saying that the idea of dating, if you're a Christian, the idea of how we do dating now, casual dating, I'm just going to get to know you, whatever, is like going shopping with no money. You're either going to leave frustrated or with something that doesn't belong to you. So don't go.
I like that. That's really good. I'm envisioning that box of cookies. You know, the ones that are frosted and have like the seasonal like sprinkles on them.
They're so sweet.
Like you walk in and you always see the cookies. I don't know. I mean, I love cookies, so maybe that's just me. Maybe you see bananas. I don't know. But yeah, if you go in without money, it's going to be a bad situation.
That's right.
You know. Yeah. So, okay, what should dating look like then? If our goal is marriage, which is what it should be for dating, what should it look like?
Well, I'll take you back to something that I feel like set a good foundation in my life. Kelly and I were ready to get married, and our pastor said, I'm not promising to marry you. And we're kind of like, okay.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Well, we were kind of shocked. I highly respected the man. I mean, a great Bible expositor, et cetera, et cetera. So it was like, okay, I'm sure. Where is this going? He says, well, I have to be convinced that this marriage is actually the will of God for the two of you. Okay. I can hang with that. I think that's wisdom. The thing that was kind of funny, we're like talking wedding plans, and he's never come out and specifically said that I think this is the will of God for you. So we're kind of like a week or two from the wedding going, do we dare ask him? I mean, if we ask him, it might give the chance to call it off. No, let's just pretend he's saying yes and that we're going forward. Any rate, I'm not excited about the communication of that particular part of it, but it really set in my mind the explanation that it gave. God created you. God created each one of you. And back to what you said about planning. God has a plan. He didn't create us for nothing. He created us with a purpose, with a plan, with works that we are supposed to do. And his statement very clearly up front was that if God is bringing you together, the two of you should be able to produce more for the kingdom, should bring greater glory for the kingdom than the two of you will separately. If you can serve God better separately, go back to Paul, and Paul talking about the gift being singleness. We kind of haven't talked about that here. It's kind of assumed that marriage.
Right. Yeah.
But Paul, being single, was able to go from town to town and evangelize the entire known world at that point, and get on ships and take beatings and go to jail. I mean, that all would have been a little tough if you'd been married.
Do you think he desired to be married? You know, because, or do you, I mean, this is probably just speculation.
No, I'm really glad you're asking this question, because I had the same question for my pastor on Sunday.
Because it's like, if God's purpose is for him to be single to fulfill more.
Well, actually, if you really want to understand Paul's stuff, something I think I buy into, there's not scripture, there's not enough history, there's not etc., but the belief that I heard put forward that kind of half makes sense. He was on the Sanhedrin. He was in the high place. I mean, he was a part of the Pharisees. He was a part of the ruling class. You don't get there unless you have money. You don't get there unless you're a power family that has influence. There's a reasonably good chance, because of his position, that he actually was married, and that his wife at some point, who was part of that whole family and was married and was a part of that, actually ritually declared him dead, because she would have had to have done that, or she would have had to have lost her position, lost her prestige, everything. There's a good chance that when he converted to Christ, he was completely disowned and rejected by a spouse.
Yeah, because if he had been on the Sanhedrin, it actually would have been required to be married, because you couldn't be on the Sanhedrin without being married. But again, like Patrick said, we just don't have proof.
We don't know any of this to be true.
This is like speculation based on historical
practices. Facts,
yeah.
And the facts are all there. So there's a really good chance that he never spoke about being divorced, etc. But look at what he says, and look at how he says it. And so he's there, and he's just in a position where once he's given to Christ and he's fulfilling the mission that he has, he basically has almost no ability. I mean, he could remarry, he could whatever, but then you get into a whole other set of things that he writes about with a pretty firm harshness and all of that sort of stuff. So then you have another whole set of things. So to me, it's whether you buy into what I just said or don't. And again, there's not enough data to, historical information to prove it one way or the other. It really ties into with Paul. I don't think he ever thought twice about it. I think he was like fixated on Christ and on his mission, and a wife was not going to add to that mission. It was going to detract from it. Been reading in Ezekiel, and Ezekiel's bride dropped dead. Mm-hmm. And God said, by the way, your wife is going to die, and you are not allowed to mourn her, because what you're going to walk through is a symbolic picture of what Israel, actually Judah, is getting ready to walk through. And so, no, you have to literally face this without mourning, because that's what Israel's going to go through here shortly. So
he told Jeremiah he couldn't get married and have a family as well.
So you have Ezekiel, who watches his wife die. You have Jeremiah, who's told that he cannot marry, because if he marries, Jeremiah, I mean, that's a no-brainer, because Jeremiah was the mercy of mercy people. Can you imagine how hard it would have been for Jeremiah to watch his wife die in that whole picture? It would have absolutely destroyed his ability to be a prophet to the nations.
So can I ask a question as I'm just going to play modern generation, not deep believing and looking for theology on was Paul married or Ezekiel or any of that. What's an actual practical way that somebody that's watching this, that doesn't believe any of the stuff you're talking about and has zero sway on them. We've got Tinder. We've got apps that you can call up somebody right away, and it's sex 24/7, and that's what this generation's idea of dating is.
Yes.
It's sex. It used to be when I was younger, the third date kind of, then you get the kiss kind of a thing. Now it's, you're just going to swipe until you find the person that's going to hook up with you, and that's your idea of going out. What do we do that is on a more practical level to show what a godly form of dating would be in this generation?
Fish in a better pond.
Fish in a better pond.
If
Well,
you're in the
unfortunately,
pond
that's
where
the pond, and it's infiltrated the church too.
Well, let me just respond to that. If someone will hook up with you on the first date, after you're married, what's your trust level going to be for that person? I mean, if they'll do that with you, they'll probably do that with whoever. Well, maybe you don't care. Maybe you that's just not a thing with you. Open marriage. Let's go that direction. But fish in a better pond, at some level, how they respond to you tells you about who they are and tells you about how they're going to respond in future situations. So that's kind of like the first wake-up call that you
I
might
think it shows a lot about their character.
Yeah, you might want to think about. And what it says is, and the paper she was referring to that I wrote, it says that they believe in casual sex. And one of the big things that I say in that paper that just over and over and really pound is casual sex is a lie. What the Bible says is that when there is sexual contact, God has designed us so that sexual contact, it's like hyper-energized, super steroid hormonal response that gets imprinted in your brain. And in fact, God takes it even one step farther. He says the two become one, not just physically, but the two become one spiritually. There is a spiritual connection that happens. And I've been taught this, and I actually believe this. When two people come together sexually, if the two really become one, get a picture of grafting. If you've got a fruit tree and you graft in a limb and you allow that limb to stay there and it becomes one with the new tree. What happens if you decide, that limb didn't belong, I'm going to take it back out? You rip that thing back out and it does damage to both the limb and to the original tree. If there actually is what Scripture says, that with sexual activity there is a bonding that occurs, then when you do casual sex and go from person to person, there's a bonding and a ripping, a bonding and a ripping, a bonding and a ripping, a bonding and a ripping. I believe that the context of that is what really makes sense in Matthew 19 when he's talking about divorce. And so God is speaking to that bonding and that ripping, and we're going, but it's fun. It's so much fun. Well, okay, it might be fun, but let's just pull back a little bit and let's look 5 years down the road. Let's look 10 years down the road. Do you want the temporary fun of sexual stimulation, or would you rather have a good marriage?
Well, and I think that's a good point, because I think we have very little idea, at least on the front end, when we're making these decisions, on what it's actually going to do to us emotionally, spiritually, like the wounds it'll create that we aren't even aware of. Yeah. Like, I don't know, just in my relationship with Derek, like I can see some of my previous poor choices, how they've affected my relationship, how I respond to Derek, and that's awful, and the lie is that it won't matter. That's the lie.
And the lie is also that it is fun, because it's not actually fun. We've fooled ourselves into thinking it's fun, but until you've had the real thing, which is the way the Lord designed it in marriage, then you go, oh, wait a minute. That's fun. Before, that's not fun. And it is shocking how few people talk about that or know that before they make that choice.
Well, the two become one. If you listen to that, the purpose is connection. The purpose is intimacy, and this isn't casual connection. This isn't casual intimacy. The two become one. And if you understand what God says, and frankly, reality, When there is genuine intimacy between the two people, that genuine intimacy will feed the physical experience, especially on the female side. And I'm not female, so I can't answer this, but women especially will talk about this, that if I don't feel the intimacy connection, if I don't feel the oneness, if I don't feel that, then the pleasure side tends to diminish. Now, we're in a liberated generation that many of the women would argue, and I could go on a tangent on that one too, in terms of why that is and why it's there. But the intimacy should feed the physical. And we have turned that around. Romantic love, think about this. The entire essence of romantic love is that the physical attraction, that immediate visual attraction point, will feed everything else and will make everything else work. And that's just an absolute lie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to ask a question here. So we've kind of established like sex before marriage is damaging. So with that being established, what is the goal of dating? Like, I mean, what should you be looking for in the dating process when sex is not on the table?
You know, it's funny. I'm going to pick on your language again. And our language is so entrenched. Notice what you said. And I'm not trying to be critical. You're speaking inside of our culture. You're speaking inside of our culture's language. So I'm really not doing this to pick on you, but what should you be looking for? It's like you're out there trying to find, well, I want the best bargain. Now, where
You're supposed to answer practically.
Well, I'm getting ready to be practical.
Okay. Well, they do call it a meat market.
They do.
So, yeah.
And we do have another Facebook question once you're done with
let me finish. In terms of one of the statements that I make that I think is just incredibly powerful and should impact our brain is you marry outcomes. If you're doing this, if you're thinking about this person, there is no other decision outside of following Christ. There is no other decision that you will make because of the intimacy, because of the oneness, because of the children, because of all of the things. There is no other decision that you will make that will have more impact on your life. You are getting ready to marry outcomes. Now, what you said actually highlights that. So from that standpoint, your point of view isn't bad. It's kind of like, I need to pay attention here. This is a serious decision. I'm buying something. I'm getting ready to marry some outcomes. But what you hopefully should be looking for is more of that covenantal relationship, and then back to bringing the God piece in to where, no, I believe this is the will of God. I believe, go back to what my pastor said, I believe we can do more for the kingdom. I believe this is a partnership that God wants. Versus me going for the best bargain, that gets me back into a selfish zone. And you didn't necessarily mean that when you were saying that, but that gets us back into a selfish zone that I don't trust me to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Matthew.
Yeah, so the question that we've got off of Facebook is from Sasha. She says, so obviously if someone believes they aren't ready to be married, then they're not ready to have sex. Sex outside of marriage is outside of God's will. So is someone supposed to feel ready for marriage before they begin dating?
I would suggest, I'm of the opinion, yes. And in fact, I talked my kids through this. And the whole dating scene, especially in high school and younger, grade school at this point, the whole dating scene, if you're not going to be committed on a long-term basis, you're basically committing yourself to a breakup. Yeah. So then the question is, how many breakups do I want to go through? And every breakup that you go through is that much more baggage. Let's just say there is a one, so I'm conceding a point here. Woo! When you finally get to the one, you have 10 sets of baggage that you've gone through. And so you've got baggage number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now what we are as human beings, we work off from triggers. So all of a sudden, I'm with the one, and we're traveling along, and that person says something just right or looks at me just right. I mean, we're not even talking anything major, but how we work as human beings, their words, their actions act as a trigger. All of a sudden, we're back to mistake number 3. And now I'm responding to this person inside of mistake number 3, and I'm treating that. If I don't recognize what's going on and I don't make those, appropriate that in a way where I get the healing of God and I walk through that, I now establish a permanent pattern with the one that comes out of my rawness and my brokenness from all of these people that I tried out in the dating world. And I was able to convince somewhat, I don't know this 100%, but my kids bought into that, so they weren't out there in high school just crazy people trying to date. They were like, wait a minute, don't really want to do this unless it's serious. Now, can I go out and hang out with someone for an evening, et cetera, that's not serious and have a good time and say, yeah, sure, I mean, that's fine. But the dating mindset, we convinced them, and I think they live by this for the most part. They threw that out. It's like, no, we don't want to store up baggage over and over again. We want to date when it's time to actually be serious.
And the thing that you just brought up, I think really well right there, you're talking about how it's the 1 through the 10, right? So even if your intent is to avoid premarital sex, if you're in this dating mindset and having one-on-one close time with somebody, I'm speaking as a dude, it might be different for girls, but it is extremely difficult to resist that temptation the more and more familiar you become. So it's like, yeah, you've gone through 10. How much more temptation are you facing on each one the more familiar you're getting with hormones and with intimacy and all that stuff? That it's just setting you up for even worse baggage, because you're 100% correct. You exactly will respond to the 1 out of 3, 5, 7 out of each of those. And that is what I think sets up marriages so ridiculously difficult. And that's even without the sex part. So that's a good point.
I agree. And to Sasha's question, like, should I even go on a date before I'm ready to get married? And I'm not talking about marrying this human. I'm talking about, am I in a place where I believe that's what God wants for me next, and that I'm ready for that. I think that goes to that quote that I was talking about with the going shopping with no money. Like, all I'm going to do is frustrate him, frustrate myself. The more times I go shopping, the more I'm going to look at what everybody else is doing and what they're buying, and I don't have any money. I'm going to want it more. I'm going to get more frustrated. I'm going to frustrate them more. Or I'm going to wind up buying something that doesn't belong to me. I'm going to wind up doing something that goes against what I believe God wants me to do, because I've put myself in that position over and over again. It's the same thing with addiction. And I think addicts are probably even more susceptible to this, because we're so hooked on the high that it gets, and so hooked on that pleasure and immediate satisfaction and gratification and all that kind of stuff. The idea of what we say a lot is like, if you're trying to get sober, don't go hang out in a bar. If the longer you hang out in longer you hang out in a barbershop, the more likely are you to get a haircut. Don't go. But how do you get to know somebody then? That becomes the question. It's like, how do you find out who they are and what they like and those types of things? And for me, those dating guidelines that we have here, the relationship guidelines, are probably the most practical, to answer Matthew's question, practical, sound advice that I've seen anywhere for how to do that.
The funny part is, like, I feel like all the married people that have read those guidelines has said, yep, this is exactly right. All the non-married people have said, you want me to do what? Mm-hmm. You've got to be joking.
I want you to hold that thought and bring me back to your point, because I want to lay a theology groundwork before we jump back to the whole dating piece, which you were just talking about. So bring me back there if I don't get back there. But this is Matthew 6:21. And this is imagine this. I wrote my own set of marriage counseling materials. I bet you're shocked at that. But one of the key points in the first session is this: for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, apply that to dating and then compare it to marriage. Once you're married, your wife is no longer an investment, it becomes an obligation, so to speak. I mean, it just the nature, once marriage happens, you cross over a line to where I'm no longer shopping, I'm no longer spending money, I'm no longer out there. So the way we do dating, it says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So where your treasure is, the way we do dating, I'm taking you out. I'm buying you a meal. I'm spending money on you. I'm spending time on you. I'm spending emotional energy. I'm calling you. You're the center of my universe. Oh, look, she's giving it back. I'm important. It's a virtual dating. The way we do dating is a virtual guarantee. I bet less than 5% of the time on the front end is there a turnoff that's large enough to overcome this principle. So about 95% of the time, if I'm dating, I'm going through dating the way we date, and then if you throw sex in on top of it, it quadruples 100-fold whatever, okay? If I'm dating the way we date, I'm guaranteed to have my emotions stirred up. I'm guaranteed to have my heart move into a place to where it's like, oh, I'm in love. And basically what I tell people is, that doesn't prove anything to me.
And those would be stirred up and feel that way with,
it could be
almost any random Joe.
It could
because
be
of
the
process.
most wrong person you could ever think about, that everybody in your circle would be screaming, no, don't do it. And within 6 months, you'll be the one going, I can't believe I did do it. But the dating process, that when I invest in something, I don't care if it's a car. I don't care if it's a cow. I don't care what it is. Whatever you invest in,
You're talking about investing in cows in a dating topic?
I'll go back to
like
on the dairy farm. I mean, we had 4-H cows, and we spent time with them. And you get to where you love certain kinds of animals. I mean, even cows.
He just called y'all cows and animals.
That's where I was going with this. I was like, well, this is dangerous.
Well, there is that old saying, right, about why buy the cow if you get the milk for free?
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I should have chosen something besides cows, okay? But my point is, it can be an inanimate object. It can be anything. Anything you invest in, you're going to generate feelings. And then what do? You walk into my office hoping that I will marry you, and I say, why should I marry you? And you go, because we're in love. And I'm going, that doesn't mean anything. And so then you come back.
Can you say that again?
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, let's get that as a sound bite.
Absolutely
we need it to
nothing.
be like a text tone or something. Every time you get that little hit or that little message that makes you feel all special, or she likes me, or, that doesn't mean anything. Anyway.
Careful. I'm not sure I want that done with my voice. But
Matthew could make it happen.
yes, he could. Quit giving him ideas. Let's not go there.
Can we just get a meme we can send to our friends when they're telling us how madly in love they are and how great it's going? And we just send this one.
So then your question is, so how do we do dating? And frankly, because we have thrown out the advice of anybody else. Again, romantic love has just destroyed so many of the pieces that are common sense here. One of the first things you should do possibly is certainly consult God, maybe even consult key people, because you want to have some idea this is a person you want to hang out with or connect with, i.e. approved by God, before you start. Notice what I said, before. Now, I understand that process can be a little tough because you don't know the person. You don't know if it's, you want to you want to at least hang out. Well, how about if we start with simple stuff like, like maybe group settings or whatever, to where I'm not doing the one-on-one thing. I'm actually having a chance to interact with this person, get to know who they are, at least weed out some of the really stuff that's just crazy before I start on something that would be virtually an automatic guarantee. I want to just say that again. Dating the way we do it is virtually an automatic guarantee that there will be emotional feelings. So that when the breakup happens, there's an automatic guarantee of emotional baggage. That's what we're doing. That's how we are doing it.
So are you saying that all the things that we think about that go along with falling in love, the giddiness, the feeling special, the excitement, the fun, is bad?
No, I am not saying that.
Okay.
In fact,
Good question.
I will come back and say, I don't know that I really want to marry you, again, as the pastor, from that standpoint, unless that is present. But the problem is timing. If you go back to Song of Solomon, he says, don't awaken love before it's time.
Right.
So you go through the process, you pray, you get counsel from different people. At some point, you have a sense that, hey, I think this might be God. And again, you need to start there, because this is the most significant, impactful decision that you will make, other than, again, serving Christ, obeying God. It is going to create more outcomes in your life, more significant outcomes than any other decision. And people make that decision after one date. Are you kidding me?
Isn't that crazy? I was thinking about that, the things that I've invested in, where your heart is, or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The things I've invested in and spent years, college, preparing for a job, learning new skills to do the job that I do, and I'll spend months picking out a house or even picking out a car. I'll save for it. I'll research. I'll read these different things. I'll ask people, hey, what do you think about this car? How's that neighborhood? Are the schools good? Do you know anybody that lives there that I can ask? But when it comes to a dude, I'm just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs from the get-go. But this is the most significant thing I will ever do. And I just think when I'm in 7th grade, and I'm not Justin T, I won't say his full name because we're going to be on YouTube. They say he likes you and he wants to kiss you, at summer camp, and my little heart starts fluttering and I get butterflies in my stomach, and all of that goes out the window. Nobody's prepared me for it at all, except what I've seen on TV and movies, which is completely twisted and warped, and every song that I've heard. But nobody has ever prepared me for what's going to happen when that happens. So I think taking that time to even decide, do I even know what it means to be married? Do I even know what, and certainly the individual decision is even more important than that. Asking people.
Let me jump off on another topic it's related. That wow response, that flutter response, that oh, she looked at me, she likes me. That actually is going to be proportional to the self-worth piece inside of you. So if you actually are somewhat settled in terms of who you are, if you've been in a family or if you've had people who have sown into you and you have a reasonable sense of value, self-worth, you're able to actually negotiate that and walk it through and not just be totally stupid within the first 30 seconds.
So you could have that happen and be like, okay, so he looked at me.
Well, it would be stronger than that. I mean, it would be, oh, wow, that's cool. And again, I go back to it. It's okay to notice, and it's okay to kind of feel good about that and go, wow, that's kind of nice. I kind of like that, and I feel good about that. But with self-worth, there is this thing called self-control. So then I get a secondary response that's, wow, I'm not ready for a serious relationship. I'm not ready for a breakup. I'm not ready for any of these outcomes that are virtually guaranteed. And so then I have the self-control to respond to that. So you get back into there's layers underneath. There's layers from all of the romantic love stuff that we have that has normalized our feelings, our responses. Then you've got the self-worth piece. You've got all of these things that are going on. You got the hormonal responses. All of these things are going on at a subconscious level, and we're not prepared for it. And so then we throw this dating thing out there. It's like, are you kidding me? How foolish can you be?
Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking this whole time about your dating sheet that's in the program.
Guidelines,
that's the word. And it talks, I haven't seen this in like 2 years, so I'm going off of memory here.
Well, let's work on it here.
Okay.
You want me to take it?
You can, but here.
Keep going.
Okay. So the first zone is like friendship. Like let's or wait.
The first zone is 6 months just getting steady in the program, just being who you are, establishing your relationship with other people, establishing a relationship with God. Yeah, that's the first zone.
And that's the worth piece that I was just talking about.
So build worth without a other person.
And until you have that, and until you're ready to be single the rest of your life, you're not ready to be married. Yesterday I was counseling with someone, and guess what? There it is. Big neon lights. The husband doesn't have enough godly connections, and so he puts too much pressure on the wife. The wife doesn't have enough godly connections. She puts pressure on the husband. The marriage is, struggling. So if you don't have a network of godly relationships to where you don't need to be married, you're not ready to be married.
It's like a two-poled teepee.
Yep.
That ain't going to stand very long.
That works.
Yeah. So gaining value in yourself, or having self-worth and the connections around you, but then establishing friendship. And one of the things that you talk about is not using commitment language.
Talk about several things.
And I had never heard about commitment language, and like maybe you should avoid it. And like I don't like, so when I read it the first time I was like, what is he talking about?
Well, again, in the program, I am quick, so I'm going to have to buffer my language here. I'm quick to tell someone in the program, hey, I love you. And love at that point is not in a romantic sense. It's I am committed to your good. I'm committed to positive outcomes. And so you could possibly say, well, we're just doing that, But what happens in our culture? As soon as you say I love you, that is commitment language. And so there's a level of exclusivity to where that person just said, oh, they think I'm really special. So what does it do? It goes right into that ego piece. It goes right into that place where it begins to stir. Oh, she thinks I'm special. And you have all of that going. Commitment language, one of the things you don't know, first of all, the emotions and the romance and everything will totally cloud you. So you don't want to be any more involved with this person than you are willing to marry their outcomes. So let's just go there. So let's keep your commitment language inside of the mentality of marrying outcomes. And it's like, oh, we're like at a friendship level. I don't know who you are. I don't know what provokes you. I don't know what makes you mad. I don't know how you respond when you get mad. No, I am not ready to make this commitment just because I had a whoo-hoo that went on inside of me.
Well, and that's such a good point, because it's like there's a phase where it's like you know nothing about this person. You don't know, like, what if they secretly gamble? Or like, what if they're really bad with their money? What if they get like this wild angry streak? I mean, there's a lot of these what if personality traits that like you just don't know. And so there's a lot of wisdom in like, okay, let's just be friends. I want to get to know you at a deeper level before I jump into something.
What commitment language, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Commitment language accelerates that sense of investment. So when I start using commitment language, it's going to generate that romantic feel. It's going to establish that. And then what will I do? As soon as I feel the romance and as soon as I feel the love, then I will use the love as the excuse for the next step. And so all of a sudden, I'm a squirrel running on this treadmill that is going nowhere, and I'm doing physical touch. That's one of the things that we talk about. Anything with physical touch is going to accelerate that thing exponentially, especially if you get over into the sexual side. So we say step back from physical touch, just stay away from it. In fact, what I tell even dating couples, just because of the temptation for sex and etc., if you find a point that highly stimulates your partner, you can do note to self, because someday that might be useful. But your note to self, and it's like, I don't want to go there because what am I doing? I'm stimulating that person at a high level, and we're not willing to go there. We're not going to go there. That's a form of defrauding. That's a form of like almost making a promise that isn't going to be fulfilled in the near future. So physical touch has to be looked at from that standpoint. I'm giving a false commitment. I'm making a false promise when I'm still not there. I'm not ready to follow that through, and I can't be there just because I want to be there. I can only be there when I actually know this is God. And when the people around me that are counseling me are giving me some feedback and they're saying, yeah, we believe this is God too. See, you need to watch the physical touch. You need to watch the commitment language. You definitely need to watch the romantic language. I mean, all of these pieces are incredibly important. Otherwise, the relationship, especially in our culture, with what we've been taught, with what's normal, with how everything goes, the relationship accelerates at such a fast level. It's off the tracks at that point, and there's no bringing it back inside of the boundaries that God would have.
So,
I'm just thinking about the language too. Not only does it carry with it a weight and bring with it the good feelings, but there can be triggers too, unconsciously. I'm thinking about how when people will have a hard time calling God Father, because that name carries baggage with it of my father didn't do this, or expectations of what a father should be and not meeting up to those. So when you call me your girlfriend, or you say, I love you, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, you're so beautiful, unconsciously that is bringing up all kinds of expectations of what that means, the role that I'm supposed to be in, the role you're supposed to be in, and all sorts of expectations that set us up for failure. Also, all of the people who've said those things to me before and who I've said those things to before. And that's all coming to the surface, whether I'm conscious of it or not. And it only takes a moment for you to step out of line of whatever that expectation is, and all of my pain is triggered all over again, because I've been dating since I was in 7th grade or whatever. So I've got a lot of wounds from all that grafting in and over again breaking up. And none of that do I see until I'm presented with it. So I think it's also important to understand that if I really care about someone, if I really care about their good, if I really truly love them, I'm going to have to be aware of those things too, that I got to kind of tread lightly, and I may be bringing up things that are painful, not just good things, but things that hurt.
And that might be a good segue. I think we have enough time for one last question that just got asked on Facebook. The question is, so how do you step back with the commitment language if you've already rung the bell? If you've already moved into that commitment language, how do you step back if you're realizing maybe that's not the right thing?
I'm reminded in Proverbs where it talks about if you vowed a vow, go to that person, beg, plead, really walk that through. And so you go to those people and you walk through and you explain what we just laid out. If a person cannot pick up on that and they're too impulsive, they're too much chasing after their own stuff, you don't want to go there. You don't want to be there. So at some point you go to them as quickly as you can, you ask forgiveness for your part in the thing and for how it's gone back and forth, and you step back and you get it on a good footing. I don't know any other solution.
Yeah, I think if you're with somebody who's mature and you're both on this road together, almost having what I'm picturing in my head, almost like a safe word for course correct. Like we've gotten off track here, you know? And I'm thinking about like on the highway when you fall asleep and they've got those rumble strips, you know? So just to be like, because it's going to happen, you know, we're going to say things, especially those of us who have no experience with having any sort of healthy relationship at all. We're going to go off on those rumble strips, and there needs to be a mutually, I feel like, agreed upon that, hey, I got to back this up. I know I said that, or I know I did this, and I realized that I aroused this in you, and that was wrong. And I need to get back on track for the good of both of us.
I think be careful with the word wrong. I mean, it is, but you know, God has premature. This is too early for that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I can be a little legalistic in case you haven't noticed.
You know, someone told me, like, when you're dating, if you're not struggling with not having sex, you have a whole different problem. You know, because like God intended certain things to happen, you know, in a good relationship. So if there's areas you aren't struggling with, like, you got other issues, you know?
I feel like I want to make one more comment, which is you need to be investing in relationship skills. And this goes back to the one. A lot of times there isn't a one. If you're growing and working towards it, if the person that you're dating is growing and working towards it, and again, I'm not sure I like the word dating when I said that, but anyway, if you guys, part of this commitment is I'm committed to become the person that God wants me to be. Are you committed to become the person God wants you to be? Is he joining us together? When you have that kind of a mentality, now the marriage has a chance to be successful. And then throw in the other part that I spoke about a few minutes ago. Do you have a godly circle so there's not so much pressure on that relationship? Because the reason there's so much pressure, and I'll speak from the standpoint of men, you know, it's like less than 10% of the men can name one good quality friendship relationship. Well, guess what their female relationships are going to be like? It's going to be like Pounce. It's going to be like, I'm starving, you give me everything. That's like virtually guaranteed from the men's side because we don't have the quality relationships. And frankly, I don't know that women are radically better.
We don't either. And I think it's key.
There's a sense of competition and jealousy and finding the one and competing for that. So then, I mean, there's almost this natural competition between women that creates the same kinds of issues there.
So if I could like wrap this whole thing in a nice, neat little bow,
you do that,
which is really hard, you know. But what I'm hearing is pour effort and time into relationships outside of a dating relationship that will give you good insights or be healthy for you. So, you know, gain a community and guard your heart with wisdom.
I'm going to say
that's kind of my two things.
I think the safest is, you know, be interacting with people, be growing relationships, be a people person, be sowing into other people and growing up in that. And the safest way for this to happen, the best way, is for there to be an aha moment where you've got people who are doing that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've been interacting with this person, and I think there might be something here. You know, I mean, there's kind of a wake-up moment afterwards. That's the safest way for it to happen versus the way we do it in our culture of, oh, just a minute, I can feel it. I mean, we operate off from attraction, and attraction is fine, but attraction is not a good predictor of long-term quality relationships. So
what is?
Ultimately, I don't like the word compatibility, you know, I mean, because I don't even like that. Ultimately,
I would say friendship.
Friendship is good, but I'm going to go back to me. The only safe thing ultimately comes back to the voice of God, to where there's a sense of, wow, I'm surrendered to God. I'm walking with him. I'm hearing his voice. And, oh, I think he might be speaking here. So let's check it out.
Okie dokie. There you go. That's all in a nutshell. Just listen to God.
I don't
Be
know
Jesus
about
was
that.
last week. Listen to God is this week.
Well, I hate to say it, but in this area, I don't trust people to listen to God. So make sure you have some other people around you
For
who have
sure.
some insight.
God can
sure.
speak through other people.
Amen.
So, all right. This was fun. I could talk about this for like another 3 episodes.
Well, like I said, I don't think that there's anything more worthwhile that we could talk about, really, right? Than who we're spending our life with and how we're spending that life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions or things you want to know about, please visit us at heartchangeu.com. You can scroll down to the contact us section, leave your comment or question there, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. We will be back here next week, same time, same place, hopefully same people. And yeah, have a good week, and thank you for joining us.